So this is the final section, social and civic innovation. And we are going to welcome on the stage Anne Mulrooney, the CEO of Visual Centre for Contemporary Art in Carlow, here in Ireland. She trained as a maker and a sculptor before going on to run cultural organisations, and she is going to talk about one of her current projects. Anne Mulrooney.
So I thought that I was speaking on civic innovation today, but when I actually sat down and started preparing the presentation, I realised that actually it was more about institutional innovation. And not that it's madly, crazily innovative what we've done, but for us in the context that we were in, it was certainly innovation. For those of you who don't know it, this is Visual. It's an absolutely stunning architect-designed building. It was designed by Terry Pawson. It is the largest white box gallery space in the country, and this gives you a sense of the scale of the main gallery. So it's 25 metres long, 12 metres high, 16 metres wide, which is wonderful because it means that we can do big things like this. Things which can't be done in other gallery spaces in the country. Things like this, and like this, and even like this. And it truly is a beautiful space. So it has a lot of gifts, but it also has had an awful lot of challenges. So it was dreamt of during the Celtic Tiger. It cost 17 million to build, and it opened right in the teeth of the economic crash. It is predominantly funded by the local authority. It is situated in a small market town that once was a centre for the sugar industry in Ireland, and when that manufacturing left, they never fully recovered. So it lost its industry, it was losing its retail heart, and by the time that I arrived in late November 2013, it had poor self-esteem as an institution. Low audience figures, no staff that actually spoke out to the world about what we did, very poor relationships because there weren't enough staff there to actually build those relationships. No critical mass of an arts audience in the region, which is a huge lack really for an arts institution of its scale. In local and national media, it was being described as a white elephant, a Celtic tiger folly, and even as the Titanic, which is all very cheery when you're coming into a new job. And as I say, reliant on not just an ever-decreasing pool of local authority funding, but an increasingly competitive pool as other resources, other needs in the area also made demands. So it became very clear that we had a value issue, that we didn't communicate or understand even what the value that we brought to the area was. So we were perceived as being of little value. So one of the exercises that we did was in interrogating, well, how do we create value? And of course, there are all the things that an amazing arts program intrinsically brings, that access, that enjoyment, that tourism potential, but actually the transformative potential for Visual lay not directly in the arts program, but in how we engaged people in our arts program. So that is through the education sector, working with community, working with the enterprise sector. Those were the areas where we could see that actually we created a lot of difference. So we had to think very, very differently about how we programmed, how we worked with artists, how we worked with communities, how we worked with groups. And this is one of the examples. This is a project that we initiated with Design Corps from the Institute of Technology in Carlow, who are fantastic collaborative partners. I have to say that because there's a few of them down there somewhere. And also with Blipar, an augmented reality company in the UK. Brilliant project, beautiful outcome that came from it. Those are 60 augmented reality blips there on the wall, and it was hugely engaging. It involved hundreds of members of the community participating in different ways and also actively experiencing the outcomes. This was where we commissioned artist Fergal Mccarthy to make a piece that really engaged with place. So he rowed down the River Barrow in a raft that he had built himself, which took him about a week. And he drew the adventures that he had on his way from Dublin to Carlow on the river. And again, a beautifully engaging exhibition that really involved people. Everybody that he met along the way was documented somewhere in there in the story. This is a materials library that we've got in the gallery at the moment. It accompanies an exhibition by Paul Moss. And the materials library, we commissioned an anthropologist to work with Paul and to tease out how he used materials, because that's one of the most interesting things about his practice. And to actually open that out and lay that out so there was a route into the work for people who may not be coming at it from an arts background. These are some of the ways that we work differently with how people are in the space so that they can engage with the work in different ways. And this was a project that we did with Nimble Spaces, a conference around sustainable housing, but it's the first time that we met a UK collective called Studio Weave, and they will pop up in the story later. So what we realized was that we needed to move from being an ivory tower where we told people about what was good and important about this work to becoming a hub, actually, where art was a means of dialogue and exchange. And put really simply, we needed to move from a place that focused on showing great art to a place that focused on experiencing great art as meaningful and relevant. So now we had our clarity and we had our vision and we had all of the learning that we had done. How would we announce this to the world, to the communities surrounding us, that actually our exhibition program and the way that we worked was not just something that they could engage in, but something that might have real meaning and relevance in their everyday lives? Well, the answer was to turn the gallery into a playground. So this we did this spring with the Playground Project, which was not just an incredible project, very interactive and a very creative space for families and for children, but it was also a meticulously researched history of how play and recreation became encompassed into urban planning and urban design. So it was a perfect starting point for us to start to talk to people about how they could take an active part in shaping the world around them. So we had the artist Rona Byrne create a research or process room for us where things could take place. We had a festival, a mini festival for the local area that was totally focused on active participation, looking at how people might participate in planning, looking at sustainability, environmental issues, getting involved in sports or volunteerism, or getting involved in visual. Very family-oriented and free events over a weekend. We also commissioned 2 research projects with third-level institutes. One was the DIT School of Architecture, and they researched the centre of Carlow town, so the architectural structure of it, how people moved through the place, how they used it. And Design Core IT Carlow, they researched behaviours and attitudes towards the town centre, how people felt about it, even where they thought the town centre was, because there were lots of different stories. And we also brought the groups together for a brainstorming as well in our process space. We worked with lots of different stakeholders and groups, the Chamber of Commerce, the PPN, the IT. We got groups initiating projects themselves and what they were doing to think about, well, what were hopes and dreams for Carlow like? What were the problems? Where were the opportunities? And all of this kind of came together and amalgamated it, and we presented it to the local authorities, the county council in Carlow. And this was hugely significant for us because they adopted the research that we had done, particularly the research that the IT Carlow students had done into those behaviours and attitudes about Carlow town, and they brought it into their economic development plan. And for us, that was enormous, because actually we had gone from being perceived as something of little value, a sort of an ornament that, God, it's great, but it costs so much to run, to something that actually had direct value in the kind of practical sphere that the local authorities operated in. So we worked with all of the groups that are listed there. We talked to all of them, worked with them in different ways, and we got really the blessing plus funding to run a project on Carlow's story, Carlow's narrative. Because one of the things that came out of all of our research was that there wasn't a very cohesive sense of place or sense of identity. There were lots of little broken stories, fragments, most of them negative, about the loss of the sugar industry and the loss of the town centre. So what we wanted to do was to start to pull together the positive stories, actually, and to build a really cohesive, shared sense of place that could help all of us in how we work and in how Carlow develops over the next many years. So we went back to Studio Weave, now that we had money and we could afford to, and we brought them over to work with us. They are a collective of architects, urban planners, economists, and they are very used to working in public realm projects where they use creative methodologies to engage people in a participatory way in planning, which is very, very different to a phrase that you hear a lot, which is public consultation. And essentially, I think that means ticking a box that people came to a meeting. Studio Weave came to us and we devised between us a process where we could work together. They understood the challenges we were facing and they had some fantastic solutions. So we set up a pop-up shop in the centre of town, and over the week of Heritage Week in Ireland, we brought lots of different people in. I suppose I should admit I have a total bias, because if you ask me what the narrative of Carlow is, I say, well, it's got an amazing Institute of Technology and it's got a world-class gallery space, and they often work together. So actually the narrative of Carlow is that it's this really creative place that often works in these nimble, innovative ways. So for me, it was really important that we were using creative methodologies to actually drive the process and to see what the outcomes were. So all of our workshops involved making of one sort or another, so that people were actively involved, and it didn't feel so much like tick box consultation. It actually felt like people engaged in something that was enjoyable and producing something of real value at the same time. We also did lots of children's workshops, wayfinding workshops, and puppetry workshops, a lot of them based on that idea of narrative and story and how narrative can lead you through a place and bring meaning. We engaged local people as champions to talk about what their hopes and dreams were, and we also worked with the Historical Society to map Carlow's timeline, just to give us a real sense of appreciation of the wealth of heritage that there is in the place. And we collected responses online, on paper, through workshops, verbally, many hundreds of responses. And then Studio Weave packed all of this into their bags and they brought it all back to England, and they are currently working on this. They're nearly there, but not quite yet, so I can only give you a little snippet of it. But what they're doing is, based on all of the work that they did and some of the story ideas that came out, particularly working with the children, they're developing a narrative for Carlow, and it's essentially a story talking about Carlow. They've identified over on this side the kind of 6 main key strengths that Carlow has, that people are aware of and feel proud of and feel a sense of connection to. And they're not just doing that, they're also developing information for us. It's gone a bit low res in its translation here, but they're giving us case studies, tips for ways forward, routes into the future based on projects that they've come across in their time that are linked to those 6 themes. So we're just about ready to come back and present this back into our communities and back into the various different stakeholders that we've worked with. But I guess this is a sense of where all this leads to. So the actual narrative itself, once finalized, it will be directly folded into a draft master plan for the town, which again is pretty huge, because if this project didn't exist, I don't know that the County Council's master plan would actually have that holistic view or the depth and nuance and richness that comes from all of the personal input that's gone into the project. From that, it's also going to be part of the local area plan. I know much more about these elements of life than I used to, maybe more than I ever wanted to, but that local area plan is important. It'll be redeveloped in 2019 for Carlow, and it'll actually be what governs decision-making around development for the area for at least a 5-year period. The narrative is also directly working with the economic development planning that's going on through the Enterprise Office in Carlow. More importantly, or I guess maybe more pertinently for us, it's also developing into partnership projects across a variety of areas where there's now this knob, this central theme that people can pull out and work with, and there's a layering and an echoing that happens, and it's in that way also tying into our own programming. So it means that narrative can actually be interpreted and interrogated and understood and reiterated, and over time, those 6 themes that we talked about, the ways that we work with them, actually really starts to build into something very visible and very real. So we're not talking about a short-term process here, it's a longer-term one. A next step for us is we've been successful in getting funding from the Engaging with Architecture Fund from the Arts Council. So we're doing a project based on the narrative called Town Planners, working with Workhouse Union, a Callan-based organisation who also have a great track record in developing sense of place through participation. And we're going to be unfolding and interrogating that narrative over 2018 in a variety of different ways, and bringing in some people that we've also really wanted to work with for a long time. I thought about how I might pick the right slide to actually use as the conclusion for this talk. But in reality, you know, it's not concluded. To be quite honest, it's really in lots of ways only at the beginning. It's totally open-ended. And well, I'm excited to see where it goes from here, and I hope that at some point you all come and visit Visual in Carlow and see how it's ending up. Thank you.